Our text this morning comes from Genesis, the 30th chapter. You know what? It's a long one, verses 1 through 35. So I'm not going to read it right now. I'll read it as we move through it. I realize if you want to hear it in one long reading, go home, read it aloud, it'll work. I don't want to keep you here until 2 this afternoon. So we are dealing with a number of things in the text today. And as we work through the text, I'd like you to notice something. Do you remember when Adam was confronted by God about eating the fruit from the tree that he wasn't supposed to eat from? What did he say? Blame the woman. How long?
Exodus.
That is, it should be Exodus. It does say Genesis. It is Exodus 34. Sorry.
Okay.
Have to have our technical people take care of that problem. If you go back one slide. Go ahead. Yeah, go back one. It says benediction, so we're done. We have a new format for this morning, and we're still working out some of the minor bugs. But
It's my fault. No. I typed up the wrong thing. We'll go stand in the corner.
So after last week, Kevin likes working with Google Slides. This is how this all came about. So while we were sitting in a congregational business meeting, he put together a new presentation for us. And some of the details apparently we have to iron out yet. So between Kevin and Carol, we have a brand new format, updated color schemes, a little more, a little different feel. And, well, with anything new, there are sometimes kinks that need to be worked out, right? Just like we have the new doors in, everybody noticed. But if you have a key for the outside, it doesn't work yet. The manufacturer apparently messed something up, the locking mechanism, so they got to come back out and fix that as soon as they get it resolved with the manufacturer. In the meantime, you use the hex key to unlock it from the inside to let people in and out. If it is locked, you just press the breaker bar to go out, not like the deadbolt we had before. So, all that said, let's get to Exodus 34, not Genesis 34. Check my notes and make sure I've got the right sermon here. Yeah, it is Exodus 34, so we're good. Pray with me, please, as we start. Gracious God, as we look at the text this morning, open our hearts and our minds to hear from you. As Moses deals with chiseling stones and writing down the words, help us to understand what those words mean for us this day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So as I was saying, you remember what Adam said when God confronts him about eating the fruit. The woman did it. It's her fault. How long have we been doing that, man? Maybe we should let the ladies answer that question. Regardless, Moses doesn't pass the buck when he's confronted by God. The Lord said to Moses, "Chisel all 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. Be ready in the morning, then come up the mountain on Sinai. Present yourself to me there at the top of the mountain. No one is to come with you or be seen anywhere in the mountain. Not even the flocks and herds may graze in front of the mountain." Now, very clearly, there's no question who broke the tablets. This was Moses. Okay? But you know what he doesn't do here? He doesn't blame anybody else for it. Now, he doesn't say anything in this meeting exchange. However, there's no, but God, it wasn't my fault. The people, they worshiped the golden calf. I was angry. No, none of this. Not like what we saw with Adam. Adam's like, well, God, it's your fault. You put the woman here and she gave me it's the woman's fault or your fault. It's not my fault. And Moses really could have done this here. He said, God, these people that you brought up out of Egypt, they were terrible. They worshipped the calf, and I was angry, so I broke the tablets. They don't deserve your covenant. But he doesn't. God says, get 2 tablets ready, chisel them out, bring them up on the mountain in the morning, but no one's to come with you. No one to be even close to the mountain. Not even flocks and herds are allowed to graze here. You get ready and come up in the morning. Pretty straightforward, right? Verse 4. So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones and went up the Mount Sinai early in the morning, as the Lord had commanded him. He carried the 2 stone tablets in his hands. Then the Lord came down in a cloud and stood there with him, and proclaiming his name, the Lord, he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord the compassionate, the great and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to 1,000s, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of their fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation. Be careful what you do, because future generations deal with it. Growing up, I lived next to the north branch of the Little Conemaugh River. It was a delightful little stream. It meandered its way through the valley where Wilmore was and on up to Portage and into the hills close to Lily, where it starts as a spring. The first 5 or 6 miles of that stream are pristine. Some of the best trout fishing in the state of Pennsylvania. But as you get a little past Portage, there's an old borehole that used to constantly, you could see it from the road, 7 feet high, jet of water coming up out of the ground, laden with acid mine drainage. From there, it ran into the stream, and everything downstream of that point was dead. Nothing lived in it. It was toxic to life. Why? Because previous generations decided you could dig in the ground and take all the coal out that you wanted, and when you were done, you didn't have to do anything to ensure that people downstream were safe of your mess. Generations later, we are still cleaning up the mess of a mine that began more than 100 years ago. God punishing the children to the 3rd and 4th generations? Sure. What we do matters. How one generation lives impacts the next. There's no way around it. What we inherit from the previous generation, sometimes we take good things, sometimes we take bad things, and we pass them on to the next generation. Sometimes I see Kevin doing things that I don't like about myself. Where did he learn them? From his mother, of course. No, he learned it from me. We often think that our actions have no lasting impact, but they do. The next generation deals with our stuff in the way that we dealt with the previous generation's stuff. And the baggage we claim, that's the previous generation's sin that we still deal with. Sometimes it's simple stuff like acid mine drainage. sometimes it's much more dire. You've all heard the rule of thumb, right? Do you know what the rule of thumb is? This comes from New England. The Puritans gave us this. A man was allowed to beat his wife with a stick no bigger than his thumb. That's the rule of thumb. What a wonderful thing to pass on to the next generation, right? It's interesting. Moses chiseled out his 2 tablets. He had to do the work. Now, God gave him the first 2 tablets. Everything was ready to go. And because he lost his temper, he had to clean up his mess, which included carving out 2 new stone tablets. Now, honestly, I have no idea what that involves. And if you told me to go carve 2 stone tablets today, you know what I would do? I would probably Google how you do it, because I have no idea. I mean, I've got a couple cold chisels that I've used to trim blocks and such, but to actually start cutting out from stone 2 stone tablets, I have no idea. I'm glad Moses knew how to do it. And apparently he was pretty good at it because he got it done in less than a day. I don't know when God gave him the instructions, but by next morning, he was ready to go. He had his 2 stone tablets. And whether he knew how to do it before or not, he had to learn, because why? Well, he lost his temper, became angry, smashed the tablets. Now, God doesn't outright chastise him for it here, but he doesn't say, Moses, it's no big deal. I'll just give you some new ones. No, make your own, bring them up, and we'll take it from there. Now, he gets to the top of where are we supposed to go to meet God, on Sinai or Horeb or whatever you want to call it. And God shows up. And he announces himself in a very particular fashion. Verse 6. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sins of their father to the 3rd and 4th generation. Kind of sounds like fun. You walk into a room and announce yourself. Name your best qualities. Try it next time at a party. See how it goes. Now, we can't pull that off because we're not God. And no matter how good our best qualities are, anybody that knows us is going to say, yeah, but. We've all got our issues, right? And at a certain point, we need to listen to what God is saying about himself. I mean, look at that list. Compassionate and gracious. Those are good traits to find in people, aren't they? People are compassionate and kind and gracious. Those are the kind of people you want to have friends, right? You want to have those around you, because when things get difficult and you've had a bad day, do you really want someone angry throwing pieces of block at you? No. You want someone who's going to be compassionate, understanding, who's going to deal with you with grace and kindness, because that's what we need. So, God is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger. Slow to anger. Oh, some days it's easy to get angry, isn't it? Of course, you all are slow to anger, right? I'm the only one that sometimes gets angry in traffic. Or with the offspring. Or the neighbors, or the coworker, or whoever. I mean, if if we really want to, you decide tomorrow morning you're going to be angry, you get out of bed, and you're just going to have a bad day, you decide you're going to do that, you will have no trouble getting angry, will you? We can find all kinds of reasons to be angry. And goodness, when we start just a little bit, what happens next? Just a barrage of things that make us even angrier, right? Is that a good way to spend the day? No. Slow anger, that's a much better way. And I'm not talking about the slow cooker kind of angry. You know, you get up in the morning and you stub your toe because you didn't turn the light on, and everything that happens after that is bad. And you're not saying anything, you're just kind of walking around mumbling, grumbling. You're angry, but you're not saying anything to anybody. And then all of a sudden, somebody does something very simple and small, and you explode. Now, that's not what we're talking about, slow to anger. No. Slow to anger, that is dealing with repeated problems and difficulties and just letting it slide off our back. Because we realize at a certain point, a lot of the stuff that comes our way really isn't for us. A lot of times when people really get angry with us, what's happening is we are their pressure relief valve. The one they feel safe being angry at and unloading on. And a lot of the stuff we get like that, we don't deserve it. It's not ours. So don't hold on to it. Just let it go. God is slow to anger. It means that he'll put up with us. And he will tolerate our problems, our insecurities, our sinfulness, our rebellion, and he will forgive us. He is slow to anger. But you know what? We still have to deal with the consequences of our behavior. God never said a word to Moses outside of replacing this tablet you broke. He didn't say you shouldn't get angry. He didn't say, how dare you wreck my handiwork. I mean, think about this. These are stone tablets inscribed by God from heaven. How do you replace something like that? I mean, this is different than your grandmother's good china. This is something extraterrestrial. It comes from beyond. This is God's creation, and it's brought down. And what does Moses do with this? He treat it with respect and care? No, he breaks it by throwing it on the ground. And you know, God had reason to be angry with him, but he wasn't. He let it go. Be like God and be slow to anger. Let things go. What good does it do for us to hold on to anger? Abounding in love and faithfulness. What a way to, thinking about your tombstone. Anybody ever think about the tombstone? Anybody have one ordered yet? Nobody? Okay. If you're going to have something on it, how would you like people to write on your tombstone? Abounding in love and faithfulness. Wouldn't that be nice? I'd much rather have that in my tombstone than the year I was born, the year I died, and this dash in between. What does that tell you? Just how old you got. It doesn't tell anything about you as a person. But saying that you're abounding in love and faithfulness, that you're trustworthy, that you are genuine, that to me is a much bigger deal. And talking about God, how he announces himself as abounding in love and faithfulness. These are good things. Forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. We all need to forgive. Every one of us. I know you've prayed this prayer with me on numerous occasions. Lord's Prayer, what does it say about forgiveness? Forgive me as I've forgiven. So, if you want to be forgiven, what do you got to do? If you forgive grudgingly, what are you asking God to do? Forgive you grudgingly. So we need to forgive. All these traits that we like in people are here in God. And it's part of who he is. And it should be something that marks the character of his people and his church. If these aren't traits that we hold as the body of Christ, how can we claim to be connected to Christ? Now, the last thing that he said was this, that he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and the grandchildren for the sin of their fathers to the third and fourth generations. Now, I've thought about this from time to time, what that means. It's not the only place that God is described this way. And it's kind of unfair for God to punish Kevin for things that I've done. Don't you think? Yet, Kevin learns bad things from me. As much as I don't want him to, he does. So from my sin, Kevin learns to sin. And you know how your kids learn to sin? Same way. Oh, I'm sure that, they've expanded on that a bit, done some of their own thing, improvised on a theme or however you want to talk about it. But where do we learn our first steps in being sinful? Not from the neighbor's kids, but from our parents. No matter how good and godly they are, we always begin by making those same mistakes that we see displayed before us every day. Now, I've never asked Kevin this question before. Are you ready to put on the spot, Kevin? Do you feel like God routinely punishes you for things that I've done? He's shaking his head no, just in case you're wondering. And I like picking on him like this because I can. He used to be decent in the front row. He got picked on all the time. But have you learned bad habits from me? You probably haven't even thought about them yet. But you have. Just like I learned it from my dad. Just like you learned it from your dad and your mom. And we live with those consequences. Most of them are unintentional. I have never intentionally taught Kevin sinful behavior. But he observes it in me, and he reproduces it. Just like you did. Just like your parents did. I don't know if it's possible to raise the next generation without giving them our baggage, our sinfulness, our rebellion. But they're going to deal with it. All we can do is the best that we can do in this. But just as God held Moses accountable for breaking the stone tablets and set him to the task of carving out a new one, so Kevin will be responsible for his actions that he learned from me, as I have been responsible for the actions that I learned from my father. That's the way this works. Now, is there forgiveness? Absolutely. But hopefully, when Kevin has a son, he will pass on fewer sinful habits than I did. I don't know if it's possible, but that's my hope. This is part of the inheritance that the next generation receives. I wish it were just as simple as that acid mine drainage pouring into the north branch of the Oconomowoc River. But in truth, that's the easy one to solve. It just takes money. But the bad things we hand on to the next generation, our sinfulness, that takes discipleship and prayer and a great deal of intention. Verse 8 says, Moses bowed down once and worshipped. O Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, he said, then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. Moses is again pleading for the people, pleading for God to go with them. It is, Lord, if there's anything you see good in me, bless your people. If there's anything I've done that you find favor in, go with us and let us be your inheritance, your children, your family. Let us be your people. Then the Lord said, I am making a covenant with you before all your people. I will do wonders never done before in any nation in the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god for the Lord, whose name is jealous as a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for they will prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, and they will invite you to eat their sacrifices. And when you do some of their daughters as your wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. Do not make cast idols. So God said, today I'm going to make a covenant with you, Moses. And part of that means I will perform mighty deeds among your people like no nation has ever seen. And they will know that I am the Lord. Now, God doesn't detail what all this is going to be. But very specifically, he says that he will drive out the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So those people who live in the land already, this land flowing with milk and honey, remember, you get milk from cows. What do you need to get milk from cows? You need farmers who are dairy farmers, right? What do you need to get honey? You need people to keep bees. So God is saying, this is a cultivated land where you're going, and I'm going to take you in there, and I'm going to get rid of the people for you. This is all pretty good unless you happen to be a Canaanite, or a Hivite, or a Jebusite. You get to move into a territory that's already, all the hard work of setting up the farm has been done. The cities have been built. The roads have been made. God said he will drive them out. But twice he states emphatically, do not make a treaty with them. When you make a treaty, it means you're friends. It means you share things. You make a treaty with these people, and then you're going to say, I need a wife for my son. A little young yet, but all right. So what are we going to do? Well, we made a treaty with the Hivites. I'll go see if there's any nice Hivite young ladies to marry to my son. In those days, you didn't pick your wife. Your parents picked it for you. Sound like a good idea? He's shaking his head no. He can't hear anything. That's the way it was done. You typically didn't meet your spouse until your wedding day. And, of course, she would be entirely veiled. If you were lucky, you could see her eyes. So you have to trust that your parents are going to do good for you. Do you think we can do a good job for you? You don't have to answer. It's okay. Don't worry, there aren't any Hivites around anyway. So, but then what happens? Well, the young lady, the Hivite young lady, the Jebusite, whatever community she happens to come from, they worship their gods. And as she comes into your household, do you think she is suddenly going to convert to your brand of faith? No. And, this is not like brethren marrying Mennonites or Methodists or Roman Catholics. This is like, they're different religions. All the ones I mentioned were all Christians. But these people are worshiping different gods entirely. God said, don't make a treaty with them. Why? Because you will eventually get involved in their culture and start worshiping their gods, and you will stop worshiping me. No treaties. And then destroy their religious icons. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship their gods. Do not cast idols yourself. God is very clear. If you're going to be my people, be my people. You can't be my people and Baal's people as well. You can't do both. Now, in the ancient world, most people look at this and say, there's a plethora of gods, pick your favorites. This is my family god. This is my national god. My neighbor's like this god. I've tried him a time or two, but you know what? Didn't impress me. Such things were commonplace. This was the way things were understood. Many gods, pick your favorites, run with it. You had national gods, you had household gods, you had personal gods. But Yahweh says, I'm the only God, and you will have no other gods before me. I am the only one. This must have made life difficult in a lot of ways because that's not how the ancient world worked. I mean, sometimes you show up with cash in store today, they look at you like, what is that stuff? We don't take it. Not literally, there's some places that do not accept cash for payments. Why? Well, employees can slip money into their pocket. It's hard to track. When it's done with a credit card, it's easy, it's clean, nobody can skim. I always find it interesting. When I travel in Canada, I pull out US money, guess what? I could be a 5-hour drive north into Ontario, pull out a US currency, and they know the exchange rate. You get a Canadian fellow showing up here in Springfield Township this morning, pulls out Canadian currency, probably going to be told, I'm sorry, we don't accept monopoly money. Be that as it may. God said, no other gods, just me. And then we launch into some very specific things. Things that the people are doing. Celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Abib, for in the month you came out of Egypt. The first offspring of everyone belongs to me, including all firstborn males of your livestock, whether from flock or herd. Redeem the firstborn donkey with a lamb. But if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem all your firstborn sons. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you shall labor, but on the seventh day you shall rest. Even during the plowing season and harvest, you must rest. Celebrate the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits of the wheat harvest and the Feast of the Ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times a year, all your men are to appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. So, things that have to be done. In addition to not worshiping other gods, celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It has to be done every year in its regular time. A commemoration of the journey up out of Egypt. Passover. The first offspring of everyone belongs to God and must be redeemed. Here's an example. If you have a newborn male donkey, you have to redeem the donkey with a sacrifice of a lamb. If you're not going to redeem the donkey, you have to break its neck. I feel like we're kind of missing this one because I don't have any donkeys. And if I did, I don't have any lambs. I'd have to find one. See, this is not part of our culture. But the firstborn children needing to be redeemed because the firstborn belongs to God, that I can relate to. We don't have to redeem with a lamb, but it never hurts to remember that the children that are entrusted to us are also the children of God and deserve that care and respect that comes with it. We may not redeem with a lamb, but we redeem with the way that we live our lives. We celebrate the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Ingathering. In all, 3 times a year, every man of Israel is to come before the Lord with an offering. No one is to come empty-handed. So that means you come with your sacrifice. It might be first fruits. It might be the flock or the herd. Doesn't matter. 3 times a year, the men are to come before God with their sacrifices. God is saying, if you obey me in this, don't worship other gods, these things we've just enumerated. Verse 24. I will drive out nations before you and enlarge your territory, and no one will covet your land when you go up 3 times a year, each year, to appear before the Lord your God. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast, and do not let any of the sacrifice from the Passover feast remain until morning. Bring the best of your first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. So even here, as this is being wrapped up, we're still getting these bits and pieces of the law that are present. So do these things that I've commanded, I will drive them out before you. I will enlarge your territory. When you come up to see me 3 times a year, no one's going to come take your land. I will protect you. Obey my word, and I will protect you. Seems like a pretty good deal, doesn't it? Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast. Honestly, I don't know what the deal is with yeast. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy communion bread. When I was a kid, my mom would on occasions make communion bread for us as a snack. It was always a big deal. And I remember, after Love Feast, before I was baptized, all of the kids that were present in the building that night, we would come up and the pastor would kind of, deal out a little communion bread for us so we get a taste. It was a big deal. But God said, if you're going to bring a sacrifice, there's no yeast. Don't mix it with anything that you're bringing me. I wish I could give you a really clear reason as to why God says that. I don't know. There's conjecture and theories, but I'm not gonna bring your best. That I understand. Bring your best. It's very easy to bring what's convenient, what's handy. To bring your best to what we do for God, that's not always as easy. But that I understand. Bring your best. Finally, we get to this last little bit in verse 26. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. I have never in all my life cooked meat in milk. I've never tried it. I don't know what it's like to do that. Now, I do like cheese on my hamburger. But to me, that's different than cooking meat in milk. But in the world of the ancient world, if we would have gone to Burger King in ancient Judah, they would have said, sorry, no cheese in the burger. And it's related to this issue of not cooking a young goat in its mother's milk. Again, I don't know the details behind this, but it does seem a little perverse to me to cook an animal, a young animal, in its mother's milk. That just doesn't seem right to me. And I don't know if that's because I've been conditioned by reading scripture, or if it's just an inherent reaction to the notion. I can't say what it is. But if you come to my house, I promise you, I will never cook your meat in milk. But I will put cheese on your hamburgers, if you want. I'll also put cheese on pizza and eat pizza with pepperoni. But, again. The Lord said to Moses, write down these words, for in accordance with these words that I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. Moses was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. And Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. He was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant. And they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, so Aaron and all the leaders of the community came back to him, and he spoke to them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near him, and he gave them the commands the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. When Moses finally finished speaking to them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out, he told the Israelites what he had been commanded. They saw that his face was radiant. Then Moses put the veil back over his face as he went to speak with the Lord. I've never tried to chisel letters into stone. I have no idea how difficult that is. Like I said, I've never tried to chisel out tablets from stone either. I have no idea how big a deal that is. I suspect if you can chisel out 2 stone tablets big enough to write on, you can probably chisel pretty quickly and get the words there. I am a bit confused as to what all Moses puts on the tablets. Is it just the Ten Commandments, or is it everything that was mentioned in this command here? And I don't know which it is. I'm inclined to think that it's everything, but every picture I've ever seen, and all of Moses' selfies, it's just the Ten Commandments. But that doesn't make it right either. Because there's more to the covenant than just the Ten Commandments. There's the 3 festivals a year. There's what we're to bring and how we're to bring it. There's how we deal with other cultures and their religions. This covenant is a bit more encompassing than just the Ten Commandments. Now, you could say that everything that's mentioned here falls under one of those 10 Commandments. And it probably does. You can organize it that way. It's not organized that way here, but you could do it. I don't know what all is on there. But my hunch is that even if you put every command that we look at today on those tablets, it's not going to take Moses 40 days to chisel them in. Now, it could be that being in God's presence is timeless, and we have no sense of how time is passing. I mean, we've all had that experience of thinking we've been praying for about an hour and a half, and it turns out it's been like 7 minutes. I suspect it also runs the other way. Sometimes when we're deep in prayer, we can be there a long time and not realize that time is passing. 40 days, though, is a long time. And to mention 40 days without eating and drinking, I mean, it's required on the back of my preacher's card. It says the things I have to do, and one of those, 40 days, no eating and drinking, you have to mention Jesus' 40 days of temptation in the wilderness with no eating and drinking. Matthew is very clear as he presents Jesus to us in his gospel that Jesus is greater and better than Moses. That what Moses did, Jesus does even better. Do you recall what happened when Jesus was transfigured? He began to glow, to be radiant. It took Moses 40 days on the mountain in God's presence to become radiant. Jesus, one evening on the mountain, he glows and Moses and Elijah are with him. Right? You see these pieces. After spending 40 days in the desert, what does Jesus do? He does battle with Satan. What does Moses do after 40 days with God? As he comes back and does battle with his people. The notion is that Matthew presents Jesus as being greater than Moses. And in many ways, doing some of the same things that Moses does. And it's clear why. Because Moses is a type of Christ. Moses never pleads for himself. He pleads for the people. When people saw Moses with his radiant face, they were afraid. And I suspect that if, you encountered somebody that had a glowing face, you'd probably be a bit concerned too. You may wonder what nuclear power plant they work in. Our first thought is not going to be, this person's been with God. When Moses came back to the crowds of people, they were afraid of him. Years ago, I was hunting, and I walked across the field to the house where I was living, and I was dressed in camouflage. And my dog knew something was happening, and he started barking at me as I'm walking across the field toward him. Do you know when he stopped barking? When I spoke to him. When did people realize it was safe to come to Moses? When they heard his voice. He called them in and they came. And they realized that this radiance was because he'd been with God. And so he would veil his face so they weren't afraid. Sometimes our faith can intimidate people. It can leave them wondering why we do things, why we care, and it can be intimidating. Sometimes we, like Moses, need to be gentle in the way that we deal with those around us. Talk to them. Explain. Be compassionate and kind. They're not always going to get it. Moses' people didn't always get it. But at a certain point, they understood that he not only spoke with God, but he spoke with God on their behalf. We often say that we will pray for people. So we say we're going to do it. Let's do it. Don't just say, I'll pray for you and then walk away. Say we're going to pray for people. Let's keep them in our prayers. And sometimes we need to pray for them right now. Sometimes we need to veil it for them as well. Brothers and sisters, texts like this can be difficult because it talks about something that happened a long time ago with religious practices that are no longer ours. We don't redeem livestock. Most of us don't have livestock. And if we did have a donkey that was born today, we may not even know where to find a lamb to offer as a sacrifice. These things don't resonate with us as being about faith. However, what does is how we care for the people around us. So if I can say nothing else that you will remember, I will say this. Be like Moses and use your faith for the good of those around you. Pray with me, please. Lord, we've partaken in your new covenant. We commemorate it regularly with the cup and the bread. It reminds us of your willingness to offer your life that we might know life. We ask as we move through the remainder of this time of worship and through this day, that you would speak to us, engage our memories, engage our creativity and our imagination, that we would see how we might be a blessing to those around us. Lord, help us to tear down our Asherah poles, to break our sacred stones, and tear down the altars that we have set up to other gods. And help us to worship you alone. Lord, where we find altars in our lives, help us to make them solely devoted to you. We ask this now in Jesus' name.